Tao Meeting Archives, May 15th, 2016. The Tao of Concentration by Ed Monaghan.
I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面上佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Hello, everyone. Hope you guys are all doing well. Today's presentation is called The Tao of Concentration. The reason that I chose this topic is because it is rather crucial when it comes to being able to align one's thoughts and actions. And this has been a preeminent topic recently among people in my circles, simply because many of the practices that we are holding close have to do with elements of concentration when it comes to mindfulness practice, goal orientation, and being able to achieve the things that we want to as we kind of move forward through life, but in a way that is not yielding higher degrees of stress, because the other thing that I've observed with many of the people who are participating in our programs is how we don't want to compound stress by layering yet another thing to do on the pile of things that one should accomplish during the course of a given day. But these practices should enhance and actually reduce the amount of stress that we're typically experiencing. So concentration is really the foundation from which all of these activities are born. And that's the reason why I wanted to discuss it today. So that having been said, concentration. The literal definition of concentration, according to Webster's, is the action or power of focusing one's attention or mental effort. And you can see the little guy sitting at the desk who's clearly in a state of concentration. And I know that that was me when I was a kid. And not literally that's me, but it's representative of the way that I'm sure I must have worked many times. And it generally is associated with effort and creating quite a schedule of effort, which typically is associated with displeasure. Now, when we talk about meditation, as we have many times, the definition from Webster's of meditation is the act or process of spending quiet time in thought. Dictionary.com defines meditation as the act of meditating, continued or extended thought, reflection, contemplation. Transcendental meditation, which is odd because that is a form of meditation, one of many, and without religious contemplation or spiritual introspection. Now, I think what we see exhibited in really, especially the dictionary.com definition, is kind of an example of the confusion that is associated with meditation, and what does that really mean, and how does concentration actually tie into that? Because concentration is actually a part of meditation. But what does that mean? Because I thought that the whole thing about thought, you're supposed to not have when you're in meditation. And transcendental meditation, well, what's that as related to meditation in a more general context? I thought that was the one that this guy, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, brought over. So how does that just meditation fit into that category? So these are some questions to explore a bit. That question of should we think during meditation is reflective of another Western philosopher, Rene Descartes, who wrote a short pamphlet called Discourse on Method. Now, I encountered this when I was in college in philosophy, first in Western philosophy. He's a 17th century French philosopher. And he came over the very famous saying, which is, I think, therefore I am. There are two basic divisions in this stream of thought. One, thought itself. So the thing that distinguishes us from animals is this idea of thought. I think. And for him, that was quite clear because I am capable of thought. I am self-aware. That means that I actually exist. Because there was a lot of thinking, which continues forth, that, well, is this just a dream that we're living? Is this that you actually exist? And his basic premise was, because I have thoughts, I do exist. Now, the second realm of experience is feeling, sentience. I feel, therefore I am. And this is a basic premise in Buddhism that all sentient beings, beings that have feeling, we should respect, and we should give honor to that life. We don't take life because there is feeling associated with this life. But then how does this play in, again, that whole idea of meditation? How does that play into it? Because I thought the whole thing was not to think. Well, what in the world does that have to do with concentration in the first place? I think we can refine a bit of this, and it's not really as complicated as it seems. But in my circles, particularly at UCLA and various universities, a lot of this type of thought is the food for confusion, and people revel in the idea of taking these seeming points of contention and then kind of beating them to death and going into this exercise, these mental gymnastics exercises, which ultimately yield nothing more than, in my opinion, mental masturbation. The core of it really comes down to how is this of benefit to anyone who is doing practices. So if we go back to something that we discussed before, the three primary categories of meditative practice, we really look and see that these are just branches of the same tree. Concentration-based meditation, where we fix our mind on a single point of focus, and that becomes our meditation, bringing our mind back to this point of concentration. Mindfulness-based meditation, which I have a definition for later, but essentially the act of being in the present moment, fully and completely aware of one's actions, thoughts, feelings, with no judgment. And then contemplative practice, which is taking an esoteric principle or idea and deeply thinking about it. The point being that it's all good. These are all viable methods of meditative practice. They're all of benefit. They have slightly different needs, yes, of course. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that can say any of these branches of the tree are bad. It's really like looking at a tree and taking in the beauty of the tree without having to lop off a limb because it feels like it's there's something wrong with it. Now, when it comes to concentration, this is relevant, and I'm going to share a story of why this may be the case. This is a story of Madame Butterfly from Paramahansa Yogananda. Well, some of you may be familiar with the play Madame Butterfly and or the movie. This is not that. So it's a bit different, and this is a story that he used to share with his students. So I'm going to read this to you. The scene is Madame Butterfly's living room. At the time, the middle of a cold winter afternoon. Since all the housework is done, and it's too dismal to go anyplace, our friend has some of that spare time she's always looking for in order to practice concentration. She sits down in a straight-backed chair. No sooner has her body touched the chair than she exclaims, "Ah, the seat is too hard. I should have a pillow." She finds one, the right size, and sinks down upon it. Then Madame Butterfly discovers that the chair squeaks. Transferring pillow and body to another chair, she notices a draft, and then closes. Next, she develops a tendency to sneeze. But her handkerchief is dropped near the first chair. Her handkerchief reclaimed, Madame contentedly thanks now for a delightful dip into the depths of concentration. A few moments pass, and her mind is just beginning to settle when the boiling radiator begins to bubble. In disgust, she jumps up and roughly chokes the radiator's voice. Once more, she settles herself, righteous indignation increasing the determination to dive deep into meditation. Then, in the apartment next door, someone starts to play the piano, accompanied by laughter and loud talking. Now Madame Butterfly is both mad and disgusted. She considers pounding on the wall, but after all, it's the middle of the afternoon, and so the neighbors have the right to play if they wish. She begins to listen and think, "That's really a good piano." Our friend then recalls other pianos she's heard. She remembers the pleasant days when she was a child and used to dance while her dear old grandmother played rustic airs popular in her youth. She thinks of some of her grandmother's escapades as an attractive young belle, and so on, until suddenly Madame Butterfly remembers her original purpose of concentration and jerks herself from her sweet revelries. She tries to assume the saintly dignity of a veteran yogi, rebuking her body and mind for their restlessness. She makes a desperate effort to regather the battered fragments of her self-control. Her eyes have hardly closed again when the telephone crows out with an impudent, patience-piercing sound. "I will not answer it." But the impertinent bell continues. Madame Butterfly begins to doubt her wisdom. It might be an important call, she thinks. So she gets up and answers the phone, only to find that someone has dialed the wrong number. This ordeal over, she musters up enough courage to begin again. But now her head begins to nod. Her sense of shame at this is shoved aside by self-pity for her exhausted condition. But forcing herself to sit straight, Madame tries again. This effort is diverted by the clamorous ringing of a hoarse-voiced doorbell. She remains still for a few moments, but then the patience-breaking jangle goes on until she begins to think again. It must be something important. Once at the door, however, Madame Butterfly assumes a galvanized smile as she greets 3 female acquaintances, all of whom have a master's degree in the art of gossiping. Behind the artificial flower of her forced smile, our friend hides the stinging wasp of petulance as she thinks, "Oh, you pests, why couldn't you have stayed away and just let me concentrate?" Happily oblivious to this, the 3 visitors enter and busy themselves raking and prodding into everyone else's dirt heaps, secure in the knowledge that for the moment there's a keep off sign on their own. Madame Butterfly laughs pleasantly, and 3 hours slip away before she has the relief of closing the door behind these inordinate gossips. Automatically, she resumes her attempts at concentration, but now her attention is mobbed by the memories of leaking radiators, piano pounding, telephone bells, raucous doorbells, and gossipy tidbits. Guiltily, she halts this mental resume. What time is it anyway? Madam looks at her watch and with a resigned sigh rises and starts to the kitchen to get supper. The living room is empty again, and it might just as well have remained so all afternoon, as far as Madame Butterfly's efforts at concentration are concerned. So the above experience is not an exaggeration. It is only a sample of what most people experience when they attempt to concentrate. So think about how many times we attempt to focus on a task. Now, this is not the story anymore, by the way. Think about how many times we attempt to focus on a particular given task and how many distractions enter our consciousness and how many of them we by choice entertain. And in doing so, we ascribe them to be necessaries or necessities. They're really not. They're choices. And in exercising concentration, as we begin this process, we begin to steady our minds. We begin to train our minds, just as we train our bodies, so that we can maintain higher degrees of concentration, we can stay focused, and begin to move in the arena where we really need to fall. So if we look at that original definition of mindfulness, the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. It doesn't mean that we don't get distracted, but we just gently guide our mind back to that focal point. We don't have to take action on those distractions. We simply become aware of them, and before we follow the impulse, we gently guide our mind back. This gives us concentration. This trains us to remain focused so that if we are supposed to be on a particular task, I have a paper to write. I'm writing my paper and I notice, well, I should probably check my emails. And then when I go to check my emails, there are 4 emails that I have to begin to respond, which leads me down other paths. And maybe I notice that Facebook tab. Well, let's see what's going on there. And then you start scrolling down that timeline, and there are 20 other things that take our attention. This is the perfect example of exactly what happens within the story of Madame Butterfly. So as we turn away from those distractions, and it reminds me of the story, the analogy that Derek uses about the Tao being the middle path, and how we have these flashing signs of distraction along the way, but the more concentrated and well-versed we are at being able to maintain our concentration and walk the center path, we gradually and gently make our way forward toward our destination, like the flight of the penguin. So if we look at areas where we can cultivate concentration, these are all viable means of doing so. Meditation in its various incarnations, ritual practice, as in Confucian practice, or it doesn't necessarily have to be restricted to Confucian practice, but Confucius certainly was an advocate of ritual-based practice. Prayer, martial arts, art, music, dance, all of these are methods by which we can cultivate concentration. And the key to this, if we look up that definition of mindfulness again, non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences. Non-judgmental is the key. I see people in my classes constantly when we are performing activities that as they begin to self-correct, they recognize something where they've gone astray with a movement pattern. There is a 3 to 5 second window where they chastise themselves for not doing the right thing, in quotations, rather than just simply observing the movement pattern that was anomalous and then adjusting the movement pattern. There doesn't have to be an emotional connection to the wrong way. It can be a simple observation. And I think this is where we get into the majority of trouble. When we associate this negative emotion, this experience of wrong with learning and with our concentration as it moves and waxes and wanes. This is natural for us. Our minds are designed so that we can sweep and we can broaden our awareness, because the human biological suit used to have to worry about getting eaten by bigger biological suits with hair and big teeth. So our attention is designed for this wide scope of focus and to shift so that we can constantly be on guard for the dangers of our world and survive. So this is natural. Then we just find that we can refine that attentiveness and shift from those attentional to greater degrees of acuity, which in turn creates our ability to live more easily and more effectively. So again, this all comes back to the principle of the Tao. These are means of expressions of the Tao and tools that we've been given to put in our toolbox so that we can evolve on the spiritual path. So that is my presentation for today. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and I'll turn it back over to Derek.
Thank you so much for that. I especially would like to get everyone to focus on this very apt phrase, non-judgmental state of awareness and mindfulness and concentration. There are different ways of describing the same state, but it is the same state. In a moment, as I get into my presentation, you will hear it described as a non-attached action, or wu wei. So I like to have everyone recognize that even though I will be using different terms than Ed has been using, we're actually referring to the same state. It is the state of excellence. It is the state of, I would even say, effortless excellence. It seems so easy. It may take a lot of work to get to a point where you can be in that state consistently, which is why people like Ed, who practice martial arts, spend so many years perfecting techniques and movements and motion. It is the same with the Tao. When people spend a lot of time observing, practicing their awareness, their actions and movements as they go through life, they can achieve the same state of effortless excellence as they interact with other people. So Ed, I think that's very timely and also very fitting with some of the topics that I want to hear today.
Fantastic.
We still have a couple of minutes to do our meeting ending ritual, everybody. So please follow me. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架对顶的是一鞠躬，接班一鞠躬。We are all done, everybody. Thank you so much.
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http:// Taoism.net/ Tao /connect-online.